interested in sharing with you the first talk, which is about youth designing games. And the first person is actually a young person who's going to be speaking. But one of our funders that's been really instrumental in supporting programs around youth designing games and advocating for youth designing games is AMD. Possibly some of you were at the program on Monday, a day-long program around this subject. So in thinking about the program for the full festival, we really wanted to incorporate that element of youth designing games. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our first set of talks, and it's going to be introduced by Alison Pierman, who's Corporate Vice President of Public Affairs at AMD, very generous supporter of Games for Change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Are we on here? Here we go. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome back from lunch. I hope everyone had a good time, a nice little break, and I think these talks this afternoon will be really interesting. And I am thrilled to be able to introduce these next two folks. One of the things about Games for Change that is so special to us is that we actually launched our foundation, the AMD Foundation, and its signature initiative, AMD Changing the Game, at this conference in 2008. And we were thrilled to do that in partnership with Games for Change. We had, and we still do, have this big idea that we can get students, primarily teens, engaged in learning great skills, STEM skills, and all kinds of other great skills, often called 21st century skills, by getting them personally engaged in creating games on social issues. And so that has been our mission from day one. The challenge we had, especially that very first year, was finding partners, people who were out there really doing this kind of work on the ground with students. And we met one of our first partners, Barry Joseph, who was with Global Kids through Games for Change. They brought us together. Barry's actually one of the co-founders of Games for Change, and for more than 10 years, he has created very innovative programs for youth, led online dialogues in various forms, video games, apps, phone apps, and the like. So he's really accomplished in this area, and what he's been able to do is take that expertise and share it with young people, and it's very exciting. Jessy Jo Gomez is here. She has been a student. In fact, she's just graduating this week from high school, and she's been very involved in developing games through the Games for Change, not Games for Change, sorry, Barry's organization, Global Kids. And she was involved specifically in the Playing for Keeps program, and that's kind of how she found her passion for developing games. And she's been such a standout with Global Kids that she actually was a keynote speaker and MC at their annual Global Kids conference. She will be attending this fall, Parsons, right here, on a full ride scholarship for 4 years. So we're very proud of her. Please welcome Jessy Jo Gomez and Barry Joseph.
Awesome, thank you so much. For the next bit of time, what I'd like to do is pretty much shut up and let Jessy Jo talk to you. And so what pretty much we're going to do is do this more like a kind of an in-dialogue. So Jessy Jo and I have chatted a few times about what she'd like to share about herself and what's gotten her to the stage today. And that's what I'd like to share with you now. So Jessy Jo, welcome to Games for Change.
Thank you.
So what do you think folks would like to know about you?
Well, I'm 17 years old. I'm graduating from high school this Friday. And I got a full scholarship, as I said before, to go to Parsons. It's a scholarship for low-income students with lots of achievements, and a lot of my achievements were through Global Kids and Parsons Free College Academy.
So when did you first get interested in games?
I've always been interested in games. I've been playing since I was very young, you know, Super Mario Brothers. You know, I have older sisters, and they would play, and I would want them to play all night because you couldn't save the game, you had to win it, so. Yeah.
So you started playing games, but then when you were in school, you had opportunities to start creating things. Games, other things, what did that look like?
In middle school, I went to a school for gifted and talented students, and they introduced kids to web design, some basic HTML coding, and I became really interested in it. I was good at it. You know, I was on these blogging websites, and I was making these layouts, and they were cool and they were fun, but I wanted to do more, and I said, duh, video game design, it's interactive, and it's something I'd love to do. So.
And how did you get interested in global affairs or world issues?
So all my I've always been interested in game design, in video games. And when I figured out I wanted to become a game designer, it was, you know, I had a rough life when I was younger, and gaming was my outlet. So when I thought of becoming a game designer, it was to make people happy because it made me happy. And then when I learned about, you know, foreign affairs and global issues, it's making people happier on a bigger scale. It's solving problems.
So when you're thinking about games that can solve problems, or you're just thinking about games that put right on the front that they're educational, or are you also thinking about some of the fun games that you played as well? Can you say more about what a Games for Change looks like to you?
Right, so Games for Change, these serious games, they're out there and they're for education, and people see them and they're like, oh well, it's a game I'm going to learn from. And quite honestly, most of the time, people don't want to play a game to learn, they want to play. So what if we're making games that, you know, they have an underlying message or underlying meaning? For example, I ran a workshop at the conference this year, at our Global Kids Conference, and one of the participants came up to me and said, yeah, you know, I really think this is interesting, I never thought of this. Quite honestly, I passed my test, my Regents exam by playing Call of Duty. I learned about the war, and I'm like, wow, that's great. See, games like that, you know, they're fun, you play them, but he passed his Regents exam, that's great. I passed mine too.
Yeah, I know when we talk, one of the things you share is that first-person shooters for you are opportunities to learn.
Yeah. So, yeah, like Call of Duty.
So, when you tell adults that you're not only going into game design, but into serious game design, what kind of reactions do you get?
Well, actually, this morning, it's funny, I live far away, and I had to take a bus and then a train. And as I was waiting for the bus, some guy came up to me and said, hey, you're a beautiful-looking young lady. I'm like, okay. And he says, but you have that thing on your face. And I'm like, oh no. So I have a nose ring. And he says, you know, if you go for a job interview, they might not pick you. You know, they'll be down to 2 people, and they'll pick the other person just because of that. You might want to be careful with that. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to do game design. He's like, oh, okay. and then I'm like, okay, bye. But it's funny because normally when I tell adults I want to do game design, they're like, oh, that's interesting. And then they don't really sound interested. But then I say, oh, but actually I want to do educational games, games that talk about serious issues and foreign policies, and are like, wow, now that's interesting. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. But when I tell youth about game design, they're like, wow, video games, awesome, make the new Final Fantasy or something. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to, you know, people to learn from my games. They're like, learning? I'm like, yes, learning. So it's interesting. I actually want both parties to be interested in both aspects. It's very important.
Al Gore on Monday, one of the things that he said was, you know, games are the new normal. Do you think we should be thinking of you as the new normal, as a new upcoming generations of youth who recognize the social impact of games, or do you think of yourself more of an anomaly?
So I wish I was the new normal. I feel like I'm becoming the new normal. If I was the new normal, there would be more youth here right now. You know, there would be video games in classes. I hope to become the new normal. And by being here, I feel like I'm starting it. You know, next year, the Games for Change Festival, let's hope there's a youth panel coming up with kids with these ideas of games or something.
And is there any advice you have for us who are adults who are thinking about young people in all sorts of ways around Games for Change and serious games to help make passions like yours move from an anomaly to the norm?
I mean, my advice is, I'm just a kid who, I had it hard growing up, and these opportunities weren't handed to me. You know, I'm here because I've done a lot of stuff. You know, I got myself involved in programs, and these programs are what really keep me going. And if youth just get themselves involved in great programs and opportunities, I'm sure they'll continue the trend. I mean, Global Kids for one. I was in another program. Parsons has a pre-college academy. I also had a scholarship for that. And, you know, we take classes together, we go on little field trips, but at the end, it's a 3-year program. At the end of the 3-year program, we had to do a community project, and our community project was focusing on these schools that didn't have a diverse student population, and, you know, we helped by making them logos and hopefully it'll help them. But see, it's these kind of programs that really get people involved in helping other people.
So this Friday you graduate from high school.
Yes.
Then you go to college.
Yes.
What do you hope to do when you graduate?
When I graduate, I want to, well, not maybe exactly when I graduate, because it'll take time, but afterwards, I hope to be, you know, in a cool big company, maybe my own, whatever. But really, I don't want to be in those little companies that you hear about every so often. There's a burst, oh, this day they did this. But I want to be in one of those big companies where you hear about games all the time, but an underlying message is that there's something new about this, but that's not what's... I'm sorry. Basically, I just want to be... I want Games for Change to be it. You know, it has to be big, and it has to continue on to bigger companies. Like, what if Square Enix made a game where you could learn? You know, we have all these Final Fantasy fanboys. They would become activist experts. They would help save the world. They would save the world in real life and not even in a game. They would just learn and they would help.
Let's say you did have your own company. How would a Jessy Jo Gomez production maybe look different than games we see today?
Maybe I like RPGs, so maybe a role-playing in a developing country or something. I don't know yet. I don't know yet because I'm still learning about this too.
If I have my dates right, Games for Change, the first festival started 7 years ago, when you were, I guess, 10 years old.
Yep.
The idea of a young person back then saying, I want to make serious games for my career, I think was unheard of. And for you to be at this point now, and that to make sense for you, I think says a lot, as much about this community as it does about you. But speaking about you, what does it mean for you to be at this point in your life, given your interests and your passions and the situations in your life you've had to negotiate?
I feel like I've come a long way. When you grow up in a tough situation, you don't think you're going to make a difference in the world. So you keep doing things until you make a difference for yourself. And then once you're able to do that, I'm able to be here right now and talking to these people. And they're listening to me. It's a really great feeling. I don't want to cry.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A with Jessy Jo, but she does want to hear your thoughts and response. So we set up a website, tinyurl.com/askjessyjo, JESSYJO. So she said she would respond to questions after graduation on Friday. Don't expect them necessarily right away. And if someone can tweet that out, I know there's a lot of you tweeters out there, please do send it out as well. Jessy Jo, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for...
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and president of Eline Media, Alan Gershenfeld.